All right, that looks like the technology is cooperating, at least for the moment. We'll give it a few minutes to see who else comes.
Okay.
Seems a slow crowd tonight. Wonder where everyone else is.
Dile ahora.
Are they gonna open the service for the full, for everybody to go in, or it's still limited?
No, it's still open as long as people come with masks and use precautions and everything. People can come into the building.
Okay, what about the children's room? It's still closed?
The quiet room is still closed for the time being, just because we can't have multiple families mixing together, especially the kids are very good at spreading germs.
That's true. Okay. It's just that the kids make so much noise because on Fridays, oh my God, I can hear all those kids and you're talking and the kids over there making all kinds of noise. That's why I don't take her, because I don't know how she's going to behave, because I don't know. So that's why I don't go on a Friday or Saturday morning because of that.
I mean, really, as far as Judaism is concerned, the sound of children is perfectly fine. We are okay with that. I mean, I know, yes, it's a little bit hard sometimes if you're needing to take care of them and trying to participate in the service, but it is okay. But sometimes, yes, you have to step out and all of that. But most congregations don't have a quiet room. It's a rather unique part of architecture at Temple Israel. Most buildings that I've been to for my whole life, the children just, they're in the back, and if they get too loud, the parents step outside with them, and then they bring them back when they're ready. And parents have little toys and activities for them that are quiet and Shabbat appropriate. And that's how the children eventually get used to being in a synagogue and being in a service and knowing how to experience and enjoy that setting.
Okay, we're gonna try. She's only 2, but let's see what happens, because I don't know.
Just bring lots of quiet activities that she can do.
Okay. All right, because all she want to do is have the little tablet watching cartoons. Educational. I don't want to take that in there.
No, exactly. But it's better to teach her there are other things to do that are fun. Whether it's playing with cars, playing with dolls, doing a little picture book with flaps or activities.
Okay.
There's all sorts of things that can be done on Shabbat that are quiet and great for 2-year-olds.
Okay. Sounds good. We're going to try it. We'll try it.
Try it, adjust, try again. That's how it works.
Yeah, because I miss being there on Saturdays. Just that it's too many hours, so I'm going to have to go at the 10:31 instead of the 9:31.
Of course. Come for whatever length of time you think works.
I really like the 9:30 and be there the whole day, but let's see how I work it out with her.
Good luck. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get the Mishnah underway. So we are picking up where we left off in Mishnah Yevamot. We are in chapter 6, and by my records, we are picking up in Mishnah number 5. And you may recall from our last discussion, our last class, that we are talking about the Kohanim, the high priests, or the Kohen Gadol in the last one, as well as other regular Kohanim, and some of the marriage issues related uniquely to them. This may seem off topic from our question of Levirate marriages, but Yevamot, as we'll see not just in this chapter, but also in some of the others, also gives us many of the different insights into marriage in general, of who marries whom under different circumstances, not only under the case of Levirate marriage. So hopefully you won't find it too off topic, but actually will maybe even find it a bit more interesting, since marriage in general is a topic that we are all familiar with, but Levirate marriage is not something that we usually have to deal with on a regular basis. Chapter 6, Mishnah 5. a common priest, that is to say, a not Kohen Gadol, not one of the high priests, may not marry a sexually underdeveloped woman. Now, the actual Hebrew word here is ilonit, which is a word that gets a lot of difficult translations. So ilonit literally means wooden. And by wooden, I think what we could understand that to mean would be, in English, you might call that barren, meaning that the woman cannot have children. Now, that's a very important technical term. To be an ilonit doesn't mean that you're no longer having children, after the pass of menopause, but instead it means that physically cannot have a child. And that's why it uses the phrase incapable of bearing children. So it's not a word that fits neatly into English. It's a very precise technical term in Hebrew. It doesn't mean a woman who doesn't want to have children. It doesn't mean a woman who had children but now doesn't. It doesn't mean a woman who has almost had children, but maybe it's very difficult and there have been many miscarriages in addition to pregnancies. It means a woman who simply cannot and has never been able to have children. Now, the question is, how do we know that? And that's handled more in other places. But we're going to see a little bit more in these two Mishnayot of 5 and 6, at least just a hint of some of the topics. So, a regular priest cannot marry a sexually undeveloped woman, an ilonit, who is incapable of bearing children, unless he already has a wife and children. That is to say, if he already has had children, then the fact that his new wife cannot have children, and again, it's knowingly cannot have children, it's a technical legal definition, not merely we don't know, then he is allowed to marry her. Rabbi Yehuda says, even if he has a wife and children, he may not marry a sexually underdeveloped woman as she is a zonah. Now, zonah is another technical term, as we're going to see. It can mean, and this is not the technical definition, but it can be used to simply mean a prostitute, a harlot, a woman who has sex for money, or who has sex with multiple partners without being careful before she gets married. But that's not the technical definition. Those do count, but as we're going to see, the technical definition of a zonah here is something a little different. Now, Rabbi Yehuda includes the ilonit, the barren woman, as a category of zonah, right? Because it is about whom it is stated in the Torah that a priest may not marry her. Why does he believe that? Well, the implication is intercourse with her is considered to be only a licentious act because she is incapable of bearing children. So this is Rabbi Yehuda's logic. He doesn't win this argument, but this is his logic. His argument is that sex does two things. It gives pleasure to the husband and wife, and it produces the opportunity for children. If, in his opinion, and again, he loses this argument, if, in his opinion, there is physically no possible way for there to be children from that union because she is physically incapable of having children and never has, then the only thing left is purely about pleasure, and purely about pleasure for Rabbi Yehuda, and he's a minority opinion, he loses the argument, I just want to keep repeating that, then the Kohen should not marry her because that would mean any intercourse between husband and wife would be purely 100% only about pleasure, which he defines as licentious. And since the Torah tells a Kohen that he cannot marry a licentious woman, a zonah, therefore he cannot marry an ilonit. Very important to know, even for Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, which he loses, but even for his opinion, it is not saying the ilonit is a zonah, a licentious woman. It's not saying there is anything sexually promiscuous about her. It is simply saying that were she to be married to a Kohen, then their intimacy would only be licentious, by that Torah definition, like I said, he loses. And the rabbis are going to show why he loses in the very next section. And the rabbis say the only women in the category of zonah, the only women who fit the legal definition of zonah according to the Torah, who are therefore forbidden to a priest, are a female convert, a freed maidservant, and any woman who engaged in licentious intercourse with a man, then she is prohibited from marrying. So the only categories are a female convert. Why? Because in the ancient world, women who were born into a non-Jewish household were considered to be at the mercy of the non-Jewish men, not necessarily of the household, although maybe, but also of the non-Jewish men in their community. And the belief was that in the ancient world, the non-Jewish communities would often take advantage and encourage the women to be promiscuous, to sleep around. So therefore, a woman coming from such a culture would be assumed to have already, whether willingly or unwillingly, been exposed to that type of behavior. Likewise, a maidservant, a woman who was a slave to someone else, is also been put into a position where she was likely to have been forced to perform certain activities, which unfortunately for the Kohanim means that he is not allowed to marry her. The final category is the one that is more common, which is a woman who is engaging in intercourse with a man she could not marry. So please note that the technical definition of being a zonah has nothing to do with actual prostitution, unless it's with a man that she couldn't marry, and it has nothing to do with premarital sex. Now, those two things are still not encouraged, and prostitution is definitely forbidden in all cases. However, it does not create the barrier to marrying a Kohen that being one of these other categories would create. And this is one of those things where it's very important to remember there are technical definitions and there are common usage. And technical legal definitions often mean things different than the common usage. The same thing happens in American law or indeed in any legal system. There are words that get used every day and they mean something different when they're used technically within the legal setting. That actually happens in every discipline, whether it be a scientific theory, or whether it be a legal term, whether it be a real estate term. There's technical language that matters within its field that gets used differently outside of its field. Okay, that was a very long. Questions. Yes, go ahead.
So the reason why they call the harlot a female convert or a free woman is the same. It's because they think they thought that before that she was abused sexually by all the owners and Jew owners, or the pagan society that will abuse her sexually. That's why. So in both cases, that's the reason why they call them zona.
Well, so yes, but it's not only that they were abused, they might have been, or they might have been trained, made accustomed to being sexually promiscuous with many partners. So maybe it was by choice, maybe it wasn't by her choice. But in either case, she has been put into a very difficult situation. And for the Kohen only, the Torah says that he cannot marry such a woman. So for a Kohen, she is off limits. But notice the other side of this, that by the rabbis saying that these are the only three technical categories of being a zonah, they are also saying that sex with your wife for the purpose only of pleasure is perfectly fine. There are some other faith traditions that are not Jewish that only encourage intimacy when it can lead to a child. Judaism is not one of those. Judaism says intimacy between husband and wife, consensual, is perfectly fine, even if it is only for pleasure, even if there is no chance of a child being born. And that's a very important principle for people to hold on to and to understand that Judaism is not afraid of the body. It does give us guidelines, very strict guidelines in some cases of how we use our bodies. And it does obviously teach us to use them within the proper relationship of marriage with our loving partners. But within that relationship, pleasure is perfectly fine and indeed encouraged between the partners.
So, Rabbi, what does mean licentious intercourse? Like in order to call someone a hooker, what does mean? That they are having sex with anyone else? How many people is the maximum in order to call someone harlot?
Right. So the technical definition is to have to have sex with a man that she could not marry. So whether that be a relative or whether that be a man that she is prohibited from marrying. For example, if she was with a mamzer, then that would also be a problem. But it's not to do with the number of people that she's been with.
Oh, so could be also one if it's forbidden.
Right. That's the, and again, that's the technical definition of having this znut, this activity that is licentious. Because again, I'll try and clarify this, and it's hard to get the exact feel for it because it doesn't fall neatly into modern American culture war categories. But Judaism does not encourage intimacy before marriage. Obviously, Judaism doesn't say sleep around with whoever you like. But Judaism also doesn't punish intimacy before marriage unless it's intimacy that is also forbidden for some other reason. So it could sound a bit like a mixed signal. And indeed, in the modern culture wars that seem to go between the two opposites of never look at a person before you get married to jump into bed with whoever you feel like, the Jewish position is more complicated. We absolutely say that a person should stay free of intimacy until they are married. But if they happen to not follow that rule, there isn't a specific punishment for them, and it doesn't create them as a legal category of being a zonah. It's, again, not something to be encouraged. It's not something to be celebrated. It's not something that a person should be doing, but you are not punished for having done so by the legal category you fall into. However, socially, of course, if you are known as somebody who is sleeping around, male or female, you may find it hard to find a partner that is willing to marry you if that is the lifestyle that you are leading. And you shouldn't be surprised if people are critical of that behavior where you are treating the beauty of intimacy as such a casual thing that you are just jumping into bed with anyone. So like I said, it's very nuanced. It's not black and white, but it is important to keep our eye on the technical definitions. Okay. Moving on to, in the same topic, but on the topic of being fruitful and multiplying, on having children. Since we've mentioned that with regards to the Ilonit, the woman who can't have children, let's talk about having children as a mitzvah in general. A man may not neglect the mitzvah to be fruitful and multiply unless he already has children. Now, this is one of those places where the phrase a man is actually very important. I'm not going to go into it in detail here, but in other parts of Jewish law, it is explained that it is the man that has the obligation, the mitzvah, of pruruvu, of being fruitful and multiplying. So he has an obligation to have children. The wife does not have that same mitzvah level obligation. Of course, they should be on the same page about having children, very important for a happy marriage, but he is the one that actually has a mitzvah, she does not. And the Mishnah here is saying that if you don't already have children, you can't just put off having children. You can't just wait, meaning refraining from the activities that lead to having children. You should be trying to have children if you can have children, and can does include if your health or financial circumstances mean that you should wait, then waiting is certainly fine, but one should not frivolously delay having children. Beit Shammai, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I was thinking, Rabbi, sorry, I still was thinking about the previous Mishnah. So the Ilonit, they had problems in that society because no one would like to marry them, and the Ktubah should be very low. Because who would write a Ktubah someone that cannot have kids? And she always need to compete with someone else, a second wife, and the second wife also have the kids that they will be the owner of the they receive all the property after the date of the husband. So the situation is terrible for the Ilonit.
Yes, and so we're going to see in the rest of this Mishnah, the definition of the Ilonit is a little bit more generous than you might think. It's remember, they didn't have modern medical ways of examining the fertility possibilities. So the only way to truly be identified as an Ilonit was either to have never entered into the signs of a mature reproductive system, meaning the woman has never shown any development. That's why the last Mishnah, the translation was a sexually underdeveloped woman. So for example, if she never develops secondary sex characteristics, or she never begins having a monthly cycle, then that would be one way to be considered an Ilonit. But that's more rare. The more common way is to see how long does it take to have a child. And that's what this Mishnah is going to talk about. So let's first of all talk about what number of children we need. Beit Shammai says one fulfills the mitzvah with 2 males. And Beit Hillel says a male and a female. As it is stated, male and female, he created them, taken from Bereshit. So as far as the halakha is concerned, Beit Hillel wins the day. And that is sort of the benchmark that we aim for having children. Is it's good to be able to have one of each. Now, let's talk about the Ilonit again. If a man married a woman and stayed with her for 10 years and she did not give birth, he is no longer permitted to neglect the mitzvah to be fruitful and multiply. So if you've been with your wife and for 10 years you've been trying and unable to have children, you can't put it off anymore. You need to find a way to have children. Consequently, he must either divorce her and marry someone else, or take another wife while still married to her. If he
Abraham.
Like Abraham, exactly. In fact, Abraham is the template for this timeline. It's not the halakha, but it definitely informs the story. And of course, Hagar was the second wife. If he divorced her, she is permitted to marry another man, as it is not necessarily on her account that she and her first husband did not have children. And the second husband is permitted to stay with her for 10 years. So this means that to truly establish a woman as an Ilonit, she would have to be married for 20 years while trying to have children, which is a fairly high bar, especially in the classical world. This is not something where she didn't have a kid the first year, and so he's able to get rid of her whenever. I mean, of course, he can divorce her. Divorce, like we've talked about before, is always a possibility in Jewish law. But he would not be encouraged to divorce her by the community just because they haven't had children for 5 years. Instead, even if she had not had children for 10 years with one man, and now she is with a second, and they still haven't had children for 8 years, the community is not going to tell him you have to divorce her or take a second wife, because nobody really knows why you might or might not have a child. The fertility is very much considered to be a mystery and in the hands of God. And so saying that it's her fault, which is what this would mean, is something the community was very reluctant to do. Yes, Natan?
But so at the end of the 20 years, after she's trying with the second husband, still doesn't have children. and the second husband decides to divorce her, will she receive full ktuba?
Yes, but then she would be considered now an official Ilonit.
But still receive full ktuba?
Yes.
Also for the first husband, for both?
Yes.
Okay.
And there is even more of a grace period than that. And if she had a miscarriage, he counts 10 years from the time of the miscarriage. So if she has a miscarriage after 8 years of trying, it's painful and hard, but that puts another 10 years back on the clock. Because clearly she could conceive, it's just something went wrong with that particular miscarriage. And yes, it's clearly maybe harder for her or her and him as a combination, but we can't encourage this couple to get divorced to fulfill the mitzvah of having children unless we've had 10 years of no sign whatsoever that there could even be a child born to them.
So theoretically, someone can be 29 years before receiving the level of Ilonit.
Oh, even more than that. You could have a miscarriage after 9 years, and then you have another 10 years. And after 9 years of that 10 years, you have another miscarriage, and you get another 10 years. You could go your entire life, never officially becoming an Ilonit, and never actually having a child carried to term either. It's very difficult and tragic for people that are trying to have children to go through such a difficulty. And thankfully, in the modern world, we have many treatments that will help couples that wish to have children to be able to. And we have many opportunities for people to adopt who wish to. But in the ancient world, yes, this would have been a great source of heartache for most families. Indeed, we know from the story of Hannah, if not from Sarah, and if not from Rivka, and if not from Rachel, how difficult being a woman who wishes to have children can be when that fertility is very difficult to come by. A man is commanded with regard to the mitzvah of be fruitful and multiply, but not a woman, as I mentioned at the beginning. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka says that a woman is also commanded, as the verse states, with regard to both of them, and God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. However, he is a minority opinion, and he does not win the day. All right, so that is our discussion of being fruitful and multiplying, for at least as far as Yevamot goes. But now we're going to return to the concept of the Kohen Gadol. So chapter 7. Oh. Okay, and we are going to once again combine the concept of the Kohen Gadol with a little bit of the Yibum, the Levirate marriage, but with another topic thrown into the mix. So I'm going to get the text on the table because I think part of it gets explained as we go through the translation, but then we're going to have to pause and discuss a few things in more detail. Okay. A widow married to a high priest and a divorcee or a Yevamot who performed chalitza, that is to say, married to a common priest. Right? All of those unions are prohibited by Torah law. So remember, a high priest cannot marry a widow. A regular priest can marry a widow, but he can't marry a divorcee or a Yevamah who performed chalitza, meaning to someone else. So a regular priest and a high priest in this situation are each married to a woman that they should not be married to. Now, that marriage stands, meaning they are considered to be married, but the high priest or the common priest in their respective situations are not allowed to perform priestly duties. They lose their rights as being a priest.
However, still they receive truma.
We're getting there.
Oh, okay.
Right. So basically, yes, while they are in an unlawful marriage, they are not allowed to have truma. But the question is going to become, what happens when the marriage stops? And that's where it's going to get a little complicated. So part 2 of the situation, right? Part 1 is just who they're married to. Part 2 is what they have. If one of these women brought with her into the marriage slaves of usufruct, love that English word, right? Milog. Now that's the special property, right? And that is property that is reserved to her, right? It is not set aside in the ketubah as being property that he has full access to, which means that it remains her property. And as we'll see, it'll be reminded, but I'll give you the heads up. That means that if there is any gain in that property, the gain belongs to her, not her husband. And if there is any loss to the property, the loss belongs to her and not the husband. Now, the reason we're going to be talking about servants in this particular case is because we're going to talk about truma, and truma as food is eaten by servants as well as the actual kohanim. So that's why that matters. But the status of the servant, of whether it belongs more fully to her or belongs more partially to him, that is going to be what's rather important for our discussion. Okay. So we have some slaves that are milog, right? Slaves that came with her, will leave with her, and although he gets benefit from their use during their time, the ownership is completely with her. Think of it as she shares the full risk and she shares the full benefit. And he only gains the fruit of the labor, but cannot touch the capital in any way.
A win-win situation for him because he's enjoying the benefits, but he doesn't take any risk. And if he has a loss in the capital, it's only her loss, not for him.
Right, but it also means that he has no claim on it. He cannot interfere with it at all. So the second category, which is called Nichtzei Tzon Barzel, right, the iron sheep or the iron flock, these are slaves of guaranteed investment. So the slaves of guaranteed investment means that he has benefit and any gain becomes his, and any loss he is required to fix. So if she came with 10 and they lose 1, when they get divorced or when she inherits through the ketubah, that 1 has to be replaced because this property is written into the ketubah as her property, and he is taking responsibility for that property.
This is the Tzon Barzel.
Yeah, exactly. The Tzon Barzel, which I think would be a great name for like a Hebrew punk rock band. Okay. Now that we've got all that, now let's make it complicated. All right, so that's the setup. Here is the actual question, or rather the answer, which we'll see what the question was. Then, under all of these circumstances, the slaves of the usufruct property, the melog, do not partake of truma, but the slaves of the guaranteed investment, the tzon barzel, do partake of truma. Right. So why is this? What is the logic here? All right. The object here is actually, you know what, this translation I forgot explains it. So we'll use the translation to explain it, and then I'll loop back and cover more to fill in any gaps. Right. So the melog do not get truma. The tzon barzel, the guaranteed, do get truma. So again, the definition: what are the slaves of usufruct property? What are the melog slaves? They are those with regard to whom the couple stipulated before they got married a prenuptial agreement that if the slaves die, their death is her loss, and if they increase in value, there increases her gain. Although the husband is obligated in their sustenance, he does have to feed them, they do not partake of truma. Why? As the commentary says, as they belong to her, not him. Since they are still technically her property, which he only has use of, then that means that they are not part of his official legal household, and therefore they are not given permission to eat from the truma, which the Kohen can only share with his household. And on the opposite side, right, he only owns the right of their use while he is married to her. And the opposite side, and these are slaves of guaranteed investment, that's son barzel. They are those with regard to whom the couple stipulated, again, before marriage, that if they die, their death is his loss, meaning he has to make good on any loss. And if they increase in value, there increases his gain, meaning if there's some benefit, he gets the profit from that. Since he bears financial responsibility for compensating her in the event of their loss, they partake of truma as they are considered his property. Now, they are still mostly her property-ish, in the sense that when she leaves, she takes their value with her. But because of the stipulation making them the son barzel, that puts them into his domain in a way that really, while they're married, they are more like his property than hers. And therefore, they are allowed to eat the truma. Okay. Questions or comments? I know that was a little complicated, but I think the translation helped, and hopefully my explanation on top of it helped. Because we're going to sort of, we're going to need that going forward. We need to understand this concept. Okay. Hearing no complications, Mishnah 2. In the case of an Israelite woman who married a priest in a halachic marriage, right, in a proper marriage, not the issue we saw before where it was an improper marriage, where there was more of a separation between the husband and wife because they really shouldn't have been married the way they were. In the case of an Israelite woman who married a priest in a halachic marriage and who brought slaves into her marriage, whether they are slaves of usufruct, the malog, property, or slaves of guaranteed investment, the tzon barzel, they partake of truma. So what's different here? What's different here is the bond of marriage in case number 2, Mishnah 2, is much stronger because this is a type of marriage that they are allowed to be in, as opposed to in case 1, which is a marriage they're not allowed to be in. And so therefore, in the second case, even the slaves that are melog, that are more her property, are under his auspices, his roof, tightly enough that he can share the truma with them. Okay. And in the case of the daughter of a priest who married an Israelite, right? So now we have a bat kohen, the daughter of a priest. While she is the daughter of a priest, meaning living in her father's household, she is allowed to eat from the truma. So when she marries an Israelite and leaves the father's household, that means that she is not allowed to eat the truma from her father's house. So if she was married, the daughter of a priest had been married an Israelite and who brought slaves with her into the marriage, whether they are slaves of usufruct property or slaves of guaranteed investment, whether they are malog or son barzel, they do not partake of truma. Although, as she is the daughter of a priest, it is permitted for her and her slaves to partake of truma beforehand, meaning before she gets married, they could, but once she is married, she and her slaves are now no longer able to eat from the truma. That part 2 here should be pretty obvious if you remember, if you understood and remembered part 1. Okay. As long as we're talking about truma, and who can marry whom, or rather, what happens when different people marry different people, and one of them has the right to truma and the other may not, well, let's make it more complicated. All right, let me get a little drink of my tea before we hit number 3. With regard to an Israelite woman who married a priest and he died and left her pregnant. Okay, here's the issue. She is a regular Israelite, not a Kohen, not a Bat Kohen, obviously. And she marries a Kohen. When a regular Israelite woman marries a Kohen and becomes part of his household, she is allowed to eat truma. If they have a child while they're married, and the child is already alive by the time the father dies, then she is still allowed to eat truma because of the child, because the child is a Kohen. Even though the child may be an infant, the child is still a Kohen. So that everybody agrees and understands. The question we're going to wrestle with here in number 3 is what happens if she's pregnant and the child isn't born yet? Then what happens to the truma rights? Aaron, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Rabbi. Not to get off topic, but does this topic right here have anything to do with explaining Judaism and abortion?
It does and it doesn't.
It basically says that a fetus is not a human life, right?
Okay, so the difficulty with the abortion debate, much like the debate before about premarital sex, is that America has divided up that debate into 2 camps that are stretched along a particular border, the border where they fight, the battle line. That is the fetus a human life? Is the fetus not a human life? Judaism doesn't tackle it like that. Judaism tackles the status of the unborn fetus along many different issues. This is only one of them. So in this particular case, as we're going to see, the fetus does not have the status as an inheritor while a fetus, and therefore it's going to make implications for the mother and the slaves. But that's not the only status the fetus could have. And saying that it doesn't have that status doesn't mean that it's not human in Jewish law. It just means that it's not able to be considered to be a formal inheritor of the status of being a Kohen while still in utero. So it's much more, the issue of abortion is much more complicated than either side of the American debate would like it to be, according to Jewish law. It is much more nuanced because, that's what Jewish law is. It's not black and white, and it's not something that you can put onto a placard. And that's why you'll find that many Jewish advocates who are truly trying to represent Jewish law don't fit neatly into the talking points on either side. Judaism believes, and I'll just give the quick summary here, just so we can sort of clear the air. Judaism believes that abortion is permitted in many cases, but it is not permitted in some other cases. But the case that make up those 2 issues needs to be delved into between the family, the rabbi, the doctors, and all the other information that goes into making that decision. And when that can be done doesn't fit along the American timeline. We don't care about trimesters and all of that nonsense. And all of those things need to be handled with the utmost delicacy and attention to the specific details of the specific family or woman, if she's by herself, that is making this decision with the best advice and consultation that she can have. And I'm sorry that doesn't fit into a pamphlet. It doesn't fit into a shouting match on a cable news network. Judaism just doesn't lend itself to those short answers. You can't point to this one Mishnah and say, but Mishnah 7 or Mishnah 4 of chapter 7 Yevamot proves that the fetus isn't a human life, therefore all abortion is fine. Judaism doesn't take that position. And I know that you were not trying to say that it did. I'm just trying to make sure, for the benefit of people who have not had longer discussions, like I know you and I have from time to time, just make sure that people understand that whatever Mishnah 4 of chapter 7 of Yevamot says does not settle the debate once and for all.
Right, but Rabbi, there's 2 ways I was looking at this one. Is one, if it was if a fetus could be considered a human, why wouldn't the mother take on the inheritor status? Unless the other problem you have is you don't know if the fetus, if you do consider it a human, you don't know if it's a boy or a girl.
Right, but in either case, the Mishnah here is only arguing about the question of the status of the child vis-a-vis transferring the right to the parents, and specifically the slaves, to have access to the truma. That's the narrow confines of this discussion. So let's go ahead and get everyone else up to speed, because obviously you've already read this ahead, which again, Safari is on the website, folks. You're able to look up the Mishnah in advance, and I promise it does help to read the text once or twice before we talk about it together. But let me go ahead and get it on the table for everyone else with a little more explanation, and then we'll double back to this topic if necessary. Okay. For slaves of guaranteed investment, right? Those are the tzon barzel, may not partake of truma during her pregnancy due to the share of the fetus, meaning they cannot rely on the fetus, who is an inheritor of his father, in the ownership of the slaves, right? So you might have thought, the Mishnah is implying, that because the fetus will, as the inheritor of his deceased father, eventually inherit the slaves that are under the tzon barzel, because they are part of his estate in that stipulation from the ketubah, you might have thought, since he is partial owner of them, that even though he's not born, his theoretical ownership upon birth would allow for them to continue to eat truma during the pregnancy, because we can see the heir. He's right in her. That's the implication. In the opposite case, on the other hand, where the Israelite husband of a priest's daughter died and left her pregnant, the fetus disqualifies her from partaking of truma. Okay, so let's make sure we get that this is the opposite case in the sense of the status of the mother and father are reversed. She is a bat kohen, and normally a bat kohen is allowed to eat from her father's household before she gets married, eat from the kohen's truma before she gets married, and eat from her father's household again after she is divorced or widowed. She returns to her father's house and she's allowed to eat from the truma. The Torah is very clear on that. The issue here is she is pregnant with a child that was born from a non-Kohanic family, and that means that she is still attached to that father, or the father, the Israelite father. Just lost my place. The opposite case, right, disqualifies her from eating the truma, right? So the fetus is attached to the father, an Israelite, and therefore she is still attached to that household and cannot return to eat the truma. However, in the current case, the fetus does not enable its mother or the slaves to partake of truma, meaning the first case in our Mishnah, despite the fact that it is the child of a priest. So this is a very complicated phrase, but we find out this is the statement of Rabbi Yossi. Now, Rabbi Yossi is challenged by this by the rabbis, and there's much more discussion about this in the Talmud, which we're not even going to get into. The rabbi said to him, since you testified before us about the case of an Israelite woman who married to a priest, in the case of the daughter of a priest who was married to a priest, and he died and left her pregnant, her slaves should not partake of truma either due to the fetus share. Right? The same halacha should apply whether the woman is an Israelite or the daughter of a priest. So what the rabbis are arguing back against Rabbi Yossi's opinion, which is the first half, what we call the Resha of the Mishnah, what they are saying is, wait, why are you bothering to mention that the woman that's pregnant in our first case is an Israelite woman? Because you've also taught us that if there is the daughter of a priest, a bat kohen, who was married to a priest, married to another kohen, obviously from a different immediate family, and he died and left her pregnant, that her slaves, again, should not partake of truma either due to the fetus share. So it doesn't seem to be relevant about whether she's a bat kohen or not. What seems to be the relevancy is that she is attached to another household or not. And in this particular case, she's attached to the household of the fetus, or rather the slaves are, and therefore it doesn't matter whether it's that she's attached, it doesn't matter whether or not she's a bat kohen or an Israelite. Even if she's a bat kohen, she cannot go back to her father's house to eat from his truma. Okay. Does that challenge and rebuttal make sense? At least a little bit. Because, like I said, this is very complicated, and the Talmud goes into lengthy debate about exactly what the rabbis are attacking of Rabbi Yossi's opinion and where they disagree. And it's a little bit more than I think we can get into in our class. You're certainly welcome to go. Like I've said to people before, if you'd like to delve deeper, Sefaria, the beautiful website that it is, please support them. You click on the text, you go over to Talmud, you click on Yevamot, and it will even take you to the whole section of the Talmud dealing with this in more detail. You click open, and boom, you're into the world of the Talmud. So if you'd like to explore how the Talmud analyzes this in much more detail and much more complicated back and forth, by all means, be my guest. But I think it goes beyond our case of discussion here. Yes, sir.
But Rabbi, this says that the fetus prohibits the mother, right? No matter if she's an Israelite or Bat Kohen, right?
That is what the rabbis are saying at the end of their rebuttal to Rabbi Yosef.
And then that prohibits the slaves too was the end conclusion, right?
That seems to be the conclusion of what their analysis of Rabbi Yosef's opinion is. Right? They are arguing about his opinion. They haven't actually given their own statement in its fullness yet.
Right, but then there was an inference that they gave that opinion only because they disagree, though, right?
Well, so like I said, that's the discussion that gets much more page time in the Talmud. Okay, 5 minutes. Yeah, there's no way we're going to do 4. Okay, it's number 4. We're going to continue the topic about the status of a fetus and with regards to its relationship to the divorcee or the widow. So we're going to save Mishnah 4 for beginning next week's discussion. So I hope everyone is thoroughly confused. This is complicated, as life should be. And simple answers are the enemy of good Jewish discussion and good Jewish law. Instead, we need to always be looking at the details and reviewing from every possible angle, because things are never as simple as they first seem. And anyone who thinks they are, or thinks they can spray paint a slogan on a sign, doesn't really appreciate how complicated life is. I'll leave you with that. Have a wonderful night, everyone, and hope to see you again for Mishnah class or many other occasions. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You going to the JTS activity, all of you now?
What's that?
Are you going, all of you, to the JTS activity, the program?
The which activity? Sorry?
JTS.
Oh, the JTS activity. No, I'm afraid I can't make it. But thank you for the reminder.
And the rest of you, no one is interested? It's free.
What's the JTS activity?
Oh, I sent the office sent many emails with the link, and it's free, thanks to the sponsorship of some people, some members. The Jewish Theological Seminar, they have a program of 4 sessions talking about different aspects. Okay, and today is the second one.
I am trying to see if I can find the link easily.
I think that I received today, I think, an email from JTS. If I have, I can put it in.
Second, I am searching as we speak. There we go.
Did you find it?
I think so, yes.
Oh, you are the best.
A second, it's just a little buried.
By the way, Rabbi, today I had my first shot.
Oh, Mazel Tov.
Thank you. That was
Okay.
my only moment that I was proud not to be so young.
All right, so hold on a second. I'm not sure if the link is going to be one of those messy links. Let me just clean it up a little bit here.
I'm trying to find where.
No, I've got it. Sending it to the chat. There's the link, and don't forget the code for registration.
Do you think that I need to put it in the WhatsApp of Temple Israel?
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and put it in if you like.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Tonight's topic is allegations of dual loyalty in Jewish history by Rabbi Gordon Tucker, and he's a wonderful teacher.
Oh, yes, it's very good.
All right, everyone, take care. Be well.
Thank you.